This is the Pipkin and Turnbull show. How is everyone doing today? I hope you're having a good day so far. It is January 1st, 2021, or 7th. I always mess that up. It's January 7th, 2021, the first show of the new year. And so we've got a lot to
Yep.
talk about. So, Jamie, what is on the docket for today?
All right, man. So we're at the end of the NFL season, and it's time to hand out the first annual Pipkin and Turnbull Awards. We'll handing out our awards to the best NFL players at Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, and MVP. And then this week we will continue our look at the NFC East Division, break that down, what we thought of the division as a whole this year. That was a very funny division to watch, but still competitive. I liked it. What was sad became kind of entertaining. And then we're going to look at our reaction to all the college football bowl games, and then we're going to preview the national championship game, and then lastly, your favorite segment, Pipkin and Turnbull pick the best and worst things they saw over the past couple of weeks. So with that, awards. So, uh, um, I mean, we can start with Coach of the Year. Who do you got?
Yeah, I think we had I think this year, what was cool about this year is that you could make a lot of cases for a lot of different coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I think about like Mike Tomlin, definitely, Andy Reid.
Mm-hmm.
I also think I think um I'm trying to remember his name. Flores for Miami. Definitely should be credited. What
Yep.
they're. I think Miami is in a totally different direction. It was kind of crazy to see them the last couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks during last season, and then they kind of were able to keep that up during this whole season. Um, but I think looking at it all, I gotta give a lot of credit because I know I've been saying this a lot about this team, but this whole team has been completely different. And I gotta give it probably to Sean McDermott of the Buffalo Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the way that they've closed out, looking like one of the hottest team, if not the hottest team. I mean, trending right during the right time going into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, they got into the playoffs, almost beating the Texans. To eventually would have
Mm-hmm.
played the Chiefs, but I think there you saw the team. I think felt flawed. I think the team felt as if that they weren't sure yet if Josh Allen was their guy. A little bit,
Yeah.
didn't really. They had somewhat of a defensive intensity, but it was up and down last year for them. But this year, it just feels like they can beat you in so many different ways. They are such
Mm-hmm.
more of a physical presence, and then on top of that is just the level at which Josh Allen has got to, and I've got to give credit to the organization getting a Stephon Diggs who had the most receiving yards for I think for any wide receiver this year. So I mean that trade in
Mm-hmm.
and of itself, and that offense looking unstoppable at times. So yeah, I think that just
Mm-hmm.
has a lot to do with we always talk about, well, what's the culture of your team, and I think and I think this would have been, I want to say, I think Sean McDermott's maybe his third year or something like that. So I mean, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think each year they've been increasingly um, getting better. Um, and so yeah, mine would be Sean McDermott.
Okay. For me, it I like to see like, all right, what did your team look like last year, and then what does your team look like this year? And you said trending forward, and so I had Sean McDermott, and then I erased it after thinking a little bit harder on it, and I've got Kevin Stefanski as my coach of the year for the Cleveland Browns. He has done what a lot of coaches couldn't do, and he led them to the playoffs for the first time in 18 years. Um, he's building something there that I think is going to be competitive for years to come. Um, they're in a little trouble right now because he's not going to be coaching on the sidelines this weekend due to COVID. But this is a team that I feel like is finally competitive in Cleveland. And so, while like Sean McDermott, like I said, I had him on my list. I think everybody was kind of expecting the Bills to be where they're at because of Josh Allen, because of what they're building there. It was kind of like, yeah, they're a good team. The Browns were kind of a question mark because they're always hyped up, hyped up, hyped up, and then they're an 8-8 team or worse. And it's so what him getting 9 wins, I think this year, 9 or 10, and getting them to the playoffs, I think, is great for him and for that city. So I have Kevin Stefanski as my.
Yeah, I think um, I think where I just go a little bit where you scratched out Sean McDermott, and you put Kevin Stefanski in. Um, I think I felt with the Browns. I think you know I I just felt like past GMs, and maybe we give John Dorsey a little bit of credit for getting
Mm-hmm.
this team built up, and maybe fell into a really good talented team. And I think what I
Yeah.
appreciate with Sean McDermott is, it's just this increasingly getting better since he's been there, and a totally change in culture. And so, yeah, and I also like the fact that the Bills, um, I don't think anybody really thought of them as powerful going into these playoffs games in this season that we would have had them at the start of the year. And I think the Browns definitely are in that kind of category. But yeah, I just like I
Yeah.
said, I know I've been talking up the Bills a lot, and maybe they'll go down this weekend, because that's how it usually goes. So I don't know, but yeah, awesome. But yeah, I think I agree
Yeah.
with you. Kevin has done, what no coach has done in 18 years, so there's a lot to be said for that. Who do we got next? What do you want to go to next?
Rookie of the year.
Okay.
So who you got?
Um, since we only could go one, I was struggling, because I liked what Justin Jefferson did at wide receiver. I liked what Chase Young did.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't deny what if you only can pick one. If you can't pick offense or defense, I think you'd have to go with, in my opinion, go with Justin Herbert. Just really um, stepped in, looked like a seasoned vet. Really
Mm-hmm.
was the reason why the Chargers won a lot of the games that they did end up winning.
Yep.
And so, and also I think I give it to Justin Herbert a little bit to his credit and to his talent was I had kind of thought Herbert actually was probably going to be a bust, but he's he seems like he's fit for the NFL, and starting day
Mm-hmm.
one, had given you look at the Chiefs the first matchup, in all respects probably the Chiefs should have maybe even lost that game against the Chargers. So I mean, first
Yep.
first game out and almost beating the Chiefs is pretty impressive. You
Yeah.
know, and I think uh it's pretty good to feel, you know, as a Chargers fan and knowing that as a rookie you can come in and be kind of thought of moving forward as your franchise guy. So yeah, probably would go with Justin Herbert.
Yep, I'm right there with you, man. I had Justin Jefferson, because you look at what Justin Jefferson did this year, and who his quarterback is, and that team. The Vikings aren't the best team, in the NFL, and but he was still, like his first start was week 2 against the Chiefs, and he didn't even know he was playing until after the national anthem, and so it was like, hey, you're our guy. This and he had no idea because of Tyrod Taylor's that doctor punctured his lung or whatever, and so he had no idea that he was going to play that game and play great. And he yeah, and like I mocked at the beginning of the season, I mocked Justin Herbert to the Chargers because I liked what he brought, and I knew what the Chargers had and what they need because I see my team play them twice a year, and so I kind of I see how their team is and how they play, a lot, and so I thought that what guy fits them, Herbert, and here we are, and so I really liked what he brought this year. I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings next year with this experience.
Yeah.
And just like you said, stepped. He didn't. I mean, it was really really cool. Like yeah. And his first start was against my team, and he tore him up, and so that wasn't cool, but it was nice to see that that he was so ready. And I watched Hard Knocks. They covered the Rams and the Chargers, and he looked like he was getting it, but the whole time watching that I was like, all right, this dude's gonna sit a year, we're gonna see what he can do in 2021, and then he comes out and plays in 2020 and just tears it up. And I think just
Yeah.
with all knowing all that, Herbert has got to be he no doubt rookie of the year for me.
Yeah. So moving on, I guess I'll pick where we're going next.
Okay.
Let's go with that. Since we talked a little bit of offense, let's go defensive player of the year. Who did you have for defensive player of the year?
For me, it was kind of harder because I almost there was a couple guys I was gonna put in this spot, but I could come back to TJ Watt. Thing that like we're in a year where the Bosas weren't like all that. JJ wasn't um playing, to what we've seen. But one guy that always stood above everyone was TJ Watt for me. Like that is a guy on defense this year you had to prepare for. You had to double him. You had to have help on that side of the line to stop TJ. And so, like I said, I was looking for cornerbacks, some safeties, some linebackers, but every time I looked at that list of possible defensive players of the year, my eyes always went back to TJ. So TJ Watt, defensive player of the year for me.
Yeah, once again, I went the same. I went the same way too. I went with T.J. Watt. When you
Mm-hmm.
just think about what the Steelers have been needing on defense for a long time now, is the because I mean, as a Steelers organization, you're always kind of looking like, we want to get back to our steel curtain days. Like we are
Yes.
Steelers want to be known as a defensive team, and you've got to have guys that embody that, generation to
Mm-hmm.
generation of players. And TJ Watt, there's just, when I think about defensive players, I think that comes in the factor too. Because it's just
Mm-hmm.
hard when you sometimes just base defensive guys just on stats. sometimes, which
Mhm.
I mean should be a large portion of it, but sometimes you just got to go with, man, that guy completely changes his team, like the whole defensive team. He plays 110% just like his brother JJ. And
Yeah,
so yeah, that's why I'd love to see all the Watt brothers on the same team. I'd love it. See,
it's
yeah,
possible.
it's very
It's
possible.
possible.
See JJ and TJ play together. That'd be amazing. But yeah, I went with TJ
Mm,
Watt for that reason. Ending up with 15 sacks. Um, so this entire Steelers defense has been kind of riddled with injuries, especially in the front seven. But he has been kind of their
mm.
constant. Um, and he's a game breaker, game changer, whatever
Yeah,
words you want to use for him. That's what he is, and just like any Watt brother, his motor just keeps going. I mean, that's what makes what I feel like
yep,
the Watts so successful is. I don't know if they're super talented at one thing, but their most talented aspect of them is their motors are constantly going and
yeah.
total effort on every play. So yeah, with that, that's why I'd give it to TJ Watt. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess we can go to offensive player of the year. I guess I can get
Yeah.
us started on that. So everybody's knee jerk for this is going to be Derrick Henry or Stephon Diggs. Um, I went Travis Kelsey for my offensive player of the year. He came in second in receiving yards this year, and he's a tight end. I think he had around 10 touchdowns. Um, just he is the most constant player on that Chiefs team. When Mahomes is not having a good game, Kelsey is always like that safety blanket, and I really, really, and his blocking I feel is underrated. A lot of people don't give him the credit he deserves for his blocking. He's always open, and whenever you think you have him, he's able to wiggle out of it. It's just he's so constant for the Chiefs offense that I just feel like he's the offensive player of the year. Like, Derrick Henry had a great year, and Stephon Diggs had a great year, and there was a lot of guys that number wise are better. But for me, offensive player of the year, it had to go to Kelsey just because of he's up there with the wide receivers in numbers, and he's so constant. He's one of the awesome vets for the Chiefs team, great leader, and so I felt like he it should be the my offensive player of the year.
Yeah, like you said, I think this was, I think everybody wants to choose anything but a quarterback for this award. Uh, because, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you got to have a lot of quarterbacks in this discussion for sure. What's interesting
Mm-hmm.
is, I think, honestly, if, we'd be talking a lot of Dalvin Cook without his, the games that he missed this year. But looking at everything,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think without question it's got to be Derrick Henry for me. Just
Mm-hmm.
rushing over 2,000 yards. He
Yeah.
is the literal motor for their offense. What gets me with the Chiefs
Mm-hmm.
is, and not to say I think Kelsey this year has been the best tight end by far. Where there was we had the debate, and I think last year we had our debate, and you chose Kittle and I chose Kelsey that last time around. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. So this year I don't think they're because Kittle got hurt, but also Kelsey has been unquestionably the best tight end in football. I think what's hard for
Mm-hmm.
me to choose any Chiefs player is that whole Legion of Zoom help each other out, because you can't,
Yeah.
if you're trying to cover one guy, you got the next weapon up. and so that's why
Yeah.
you see big games from Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, Watkins. I mean, you've got
Mm-hmm.
the Legion of Zoom. So I mean, that's you know whether you like it or not, that's the
Yeah.
only reason I kind of don't put as many Chiefs players that their whole entire offense is like, especially their skilled players, is based on, well, if we're gonna focus on Hill, well, then we're gonna go to like you can't. It's all you've got to pick your poison, and so at time
Yeah.
but yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, maybe on that whole entire, especially this year, maybe moving forward. I mean, you could maybe find other ways to stop some of those players, but you can't see him if Kelsey is going. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to stop that duo when they're going, because
Yeah.
like I said, his
I
route
agree.
running and just getting to open spots. I don't see any other tight ends doing it quite like him. And his hands have gotten a lot better. I've seen a lot fewer drop
Mm-hmm.
balls from Kelsey this year. I think that's also helped him out. But yeah, just you gotta, like Derrick Henry in this age running for 2,000 yards is really impressive.
Yeah.
So, but what's funny is, we keep talking about, it's pass heavy and things, but there seems to be a lot more of these running backs that are having a lot more success nowadays. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
teams are really going back to where we've got to be more balanced. And so I think
Yeah.
moving forward, these running backs are going to become like they did in the past, more and more crucial to their teams. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that one was a hard one for me. Because yeah, everybody wants to put Henry, but I just feel like what with what Kelsey did and with the weapons that are around him for him to lead the team in receiving, I feel was awesome and speaks a lot about him. But yeah, moving on. Comeback player of the year. I feel like this one is an easy one. It should be called the Alex Smith Award because that he is the ultimate comeback player of the year for me. 17 surgeries, told he might die, told he might lose his leg. Yeah, and then now he's in the playoffs. You know, the Washington football team is 4-1. Yeah, 4-1 with him. And so I that one was a no brainer for me. I mean, unless you got someone different,
Yeah, no, I
I
mean
feel like
the two. I mean, obvious. I agree with you. I mean, like you said, they've got to rename it to the Alex Smith Award because it embodies everything what you
Mhm.
talk about with the comeback player. But the one that I think had got less traction, which I didn't really understand, is I felt it was between probably Big Ben and Alex Smith because
Yeah,
he was he had a severe injury that could have ended his, not like Alex Smith because that was life, but his was,
yeah,
if this surgery doesn't work, you will not be able to throw a football again. And
yeah,
so and then to come out and um, lead his team to 12-3. Um, it says a lot on his year too. But like you were saying, you gotta name it
yes,
the Alex Smith Award from now on. So. But Big Ben did incredible things, and to me, and um,
hmm
it showed how much he was needed on that team, how much his presence made a difference on that team that was filled with talent last year, but they didn't have Big Ben,
hmm
and that was kind of the same look, when we think about when Peyton Manning was out, that impact, because a lot of people just
hmm
wanted to give Peyton Manning the MVP award that year because he was like ranked super high in like the players top 100, and he didn't even play that year because they realized like
yeah,
how much the Colts needed him, how much he lifted the Colts,
hmm
so it was kind of that kind of same feeling. So hopefully, um they're able to do something. Hopefully the elbow holds in for the playoffs. But yes, Alex Smith Award. Yep, comeback player of the year.
yep,
Moving on to I think we're on the maybe where
MVP.
we've been going back and forth a lot this year, you and I. But I think when it's all said and done for me, I had to give it to that bad man in Green Bay, which would be Aaron Rodgers. So, um,
Yeah.
you know, 48 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. We talk
Mm-hmm.
about the MVP. If this guy wasn't playing, the Packers definitely would not be at the level they are at, and leads the team to a first round bye as well. And so,
Mm-hmm.
just the way that he's looked at all year, the way he's lifted his team, and the way that they're sitting going into the playoffs, that's I gotta for as much as I really talked up Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, really looking at what like I said, Patrick Mahomes has the Legion of Zoom. Josh Allen, I feel, has a lot more dynamic weapons. And the Buffalo Bills as a
Mm-hmm.
whole, I think, are a better team, or as a whole team. You looking at them, so because there's there's just too much that Aaron Rodgers brings to them. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'd go Aaron Rodgers for MVP.
Oh, see, this one is the one that I struggled with, and oddly enough, Mahomes wasn't even on my list, because of that team that he is on. I wanted to give this to Derrick Henry because in a passing league for what the numbers he put up is MVP worthy. Earlier in the year, it was Russell Wilson. Then it was for me Dalvin Cook.
Yeah,
Then it was Derrick Henry. But then you everything you said was right. It's Aaron Rodgers this year. With the he and like I don't really buy into that. Like he has less weapons because he has a great running back behind him in Jones. He's got Adams as a wide receiver. That tight end that he's got is no slouch. So he's got weapons there. But man, I don't know if it was because they drafted a quarterback in the first round and they just lit him on fire. This could be his last year in Green Bay. We don't know. But that man is this year the MVP. He lifted that whole team up to a first round bye in the NFC, um, and just put up amazing numbers. Um, and so I couldn't deny Aaron Rodgers the MVP this year. Just couldn't do it.
yeah,
And so yeah, that is my
yeah.
MVP.
So that was our
So
awards season for the year 2020. Lot of you know great performances from a lot of
mhm,
comeback players this year, really igniting them, and that Aaron Rodgers was a part of that. So I mean, yeah.
yes,
So fun year, and it's not over. We got playoffs coming up. So, uh, but um,
yes,
but we've been doing our let's look at each division, and this week we're going to be talking about the NFC East. I know that the playoffs are decided, but part of these discussions are, well, what are these teams going to be doing in the draft and in the upcoming years? That's why I also
mhm,
kind of like to do it. And the NFC East has a lot of holes to fill. Jamie, any opening
yeah.
thoughts?
Man, this all right. So this division is sad. It's just really, really sad, but it was entertaining. Because it was just like one of these teams is going to the playoffs. None of them deserve it, but one of these teams is going to the playoffs, and it ended up being Washington, which I love because of Alex Smith. Uh, but there's so much that needs to be corrected for each of these teams. Washington will start there. Alex might not be there next year, and so what are they going to do for quarterback? Because they already let Dwayne Haskins go. Uh, there's a lot. Luckily, I trust Ron there, Coach Riviera. I think he's a good leader for that team going
Yeah.
forward. Um, the Giants. For me, the Giants are the best team in this division. And when Barkley comes back next year, if he is anything like he was years past, that's going to be a good team going forward. They need to get a wide receiver, someone that can stretch that field, and I think the Giants might surprise a lot of teams. Like you could take that record of 6-10 and probably switch it.
So
I
so you
feel
would
that's the
so you would
Giants.
if you were going to right now pick a team like that you would want to coach, you would go with the Giants, or
Yeah,
the best
I
best
would.
situation moving forward, you'd go with the Giants.
I trust their quarterback. I love their running back. Defense, I feel, has some good pieces. Offensively, they have some good pieces. They're a wild card team to me right now. Um, so yeah, I would going forward. I would trust the Giants.
Yeah, and you know, picking off what you were saying, looking at Dallas and Philadelphia, Philadelphia having one of the craziest moves we've seen last week with benching Jalen Hurts at the very end.
Hmm.
You know, uh, I was not a fan of that because even if you just, Jalen wasn't having his best game, but even Jalen with his legs was a better option for him. I didn't know. Did you have any thoughts about
Yes,
that situation?
I will. In another segment, I will talk about that because it I'm mixed on that. I feel like there was positives and negatives for that whole thing. Um so I will touch on that at a later segment. Um but for me, like Dallas is the biggest, like, what are they doing in this division? I feel like Dallas should have won this division because of their talent. Now, obviously, Dak going down um, doesn't help anything, but Dallas, to me, I think they should have ran away with this division this year. But you they're losing their quarterback definitely kind of hurt them. But one thing I noticed about Dallas was Zeke kind of quit in that last
Yeah.
game. He ran
I
for
feel
some
like he
yards
quit
and
after he
then
got his money.
um,
I hate being like one of those guys, but
yeah,
I kind of felt like he's been doing, like, I don't know. It's definitely not like rookie or his
yeah,
second year. And I think he had some injuries, but still, I mean, it's just, Zeke is just, I don't know. I,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Zeke for me, I've definitely noticed that he's kind of quit. But it became really obvious the last week, um, week 17, because he ran for that, like, a couple yards, and then he tapped himself out, and it was like, and then he later said he was having like hamstring issue or whatever, but I don't believe that for a second. I think he quit on this team. He knew there was really nothing to play for, um, and he was just kind of done with the whole season and everything. And it'll be interesting going forward. Like, are you gonna still be that guy who wants to be fed more, or are you just gonna become just another highly paid running back that doesn't amount to his potential? And to me, so far, he hasn't. This was a year for him to put the Dallas Cowboys on his back and lead them to a division title and into the playoffs, and he didn't do that. You know, he he had 979 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 6 fumbles. And when you're paid to like he is, you should be putting up Derrick Henry numbers, and you're not. And so I feel like he definitely let the team down. Definitely let the team down this year. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll touch on Philadelphia in a
Right.
later segment. Uh, but Dallas for me is just kind of a they're just the biggest like what are you doing? Like what's going on in Dallas? That team should not be 6 and
Right.
10. Even with Andy Dalton at quarterback, that team should not be 6 and 10. It just didn't make sense to me. That's why I don't trust them going forward. But I do trust the Giants going forward.
Yeah, and
So,
to answer kind of what I asked you, I had talked about a little bit after the Washington had beat the Steelers, but I like kind of where Washington is trending. I think you get in, you either
mhm.
draft yourself a QB or what's interesting is that they're talking about maybe getting Cam Newton in there. So I mean, I that defense for Washington is amazing in the front seven. And
Yes,
I think NFC East and what they've been able to show this year. I think moving forward, Washington is very easily going to have the best defense in that division. Um, and I
I
think
would
it's
agree.
very easily you can get some offensive weapons. And like you said, I love Ron Riviera. I think he gets the most out of the little bit of talent that he has.
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of
Mhm.
looking at this team in a way. I just for the first time in the longest of times I could ever think, I really like what Washington is doing. You know, um,
Yeah.
I like it even more than even the Robert Griffin years. Where they're at.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, if that question where you chose the Giants, I'd probably choose Washington just because of they've almost got that defense figured out, and then you get a little bit of that offense, and
Mhm.
then you know the thing is about that culture with what Ron Riviera has done is he's definitely like a player's guy, but like I said, he's a guy that
Yes.
wants some of these players who, on their last legs, who have something a little bit left in the tank. I feel like he can
Yeah.
get that out. And this whole year we talked about the cultures of teams, and where you talked about the Cowboys, I'm the same feeling. Like I just don't know how you can just like keep paying these guys who are super talented and get nothing from it, you know? And the
Yeah.
reason is that you see it, like you see the talent. Like, is it the coaching? And they fired the coaches. Is it just Jerry?
Mhm.
And I've talked about,
Mhm.
I just was if I was Jerry, I would just clean house, you know, because
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily
Start
Jerry. It's
over.
just, I think just I think he cares so much for his, like I've said in the past, I think he cares so much for his players. Like I haven't ever heard of a player, I'd have to look it up because I'm sure there is like a player that just absolutely doesn't like Jerry Jones, you know.
Yeah.
It's the opposite usually. um, even the past
Yeah.
guys, but it's just like the whole culture of Dallas is just off, and I don't know if it's a McCarthy thing or whatever, but um, I just yeah, and with Philadelphia, um, I don't think it's time to get rid of Doug Peterson. I don't know who it's on there, but I
Mm.
mean, you lost like this is not your like the year after the Super Bowl, you didn't have your Super Bowl team, you know?
Yeah.
And the whole thing with Carson Wentz has been um, really interesting because, early on when, I thought with Carson Wentz and the drama he's created now, you just don't think of a Carson Wentz causing this for his team, and being
Yeah.
healthy and then being inactive, and stuff. So I mean, I I I still like Doug Peterson there as the head coach. I just think, you know, um, they've got a lot to sort out in Philadelphia. I don't want to be super, biased. I mean, I do like Jalen Hurts, but I don't even know necessarily if he is the guy. I don't think,
Yeah.
based on what I've seen, I I think he definitely was a catalyst. I think he definitely did a better job than Carson Wentz. But then again, you talk
Yeah.
about weapons. You didn't, an injured Miles Sanders. There's a lot to fix with
Hmm.
Philadelphia. So, um, yeah, but in the playoffs, you've got Washington, and look, let's see what Washington's able to do. I mean, they've upset a couple teams, in their run. They would be playing who would be the second seed for the NFC. Tampa
Tampa
Bay.
Bay.
So you'd have to upset Tom Brady and folks. So we'll see. If they're able to do that. So
Yeah.
moving on, kind of as we are coming closer to the end of our show, we saw some playoff action in college football. So the college football national championship is set with Ohio State playing Alabama. There's talks of maybe COVID and postponing. Haven't heard any of the latest to seeing if that's actually postponed. If it isn't, it's going to be played on Monday. But they played their semifinal games where Alabama was against Notre Dame and Ohio State versus Clemson. So, Jamie, did anything stand out to you in those games?
The one game that I watched and I was happy to watch was the Florida State versus or Florida, I should say, versus OU. Um, I did not expect Oklahoma to run away with that game like they did. Honestly, I thought Florida was the better team. I thought Trask. I thought he was better quarterback. Everything that when we break down teams, like, all right, who's the better team? Who's got the better quarterback? Who's got the better head coach? Florida for me checked all those boxes, and so I was surprised to see them just like for Oklahoma just to run away with it like they did. Um, Trask did not have a good game, especially to his standards because he's been. Um, so yeah, that was mine. Like it didn't make sense, but I mean, I love watching Florida lose as a Miami Hurricane fan, but 55-20. I didn't expect that. Um, I think going forward next year, Oklahoma might be a team to look out for in the top five, possibly getting into the playoffs next year. I
Eh,
really liked what
I
they
still feel
showed.
like they're gonna find a way to lose two games.
Yeah, maybe.
No, but I mean, and here's the thing with Florida was they had a ton of guys not playing in that game. I
Yeah.
would have liked to seen Florida actually want to be there, but you could
Mm,
tell. I mean, they got up a little early on OU, but then I think they scored first or whatever. But actually, no, not an OU game. But it was a bad start because they got three turnovers to start the game. But it was
yeah.
just, they didn't have Kyle Pitts. They didn't have any of their offensive weapons.
Yeah.
And so when I watched that, it was just a team just not wanting to be there, that they were done. And it's hard to
Yeah.
see that because you would like to have seen, the Florida that came out against Alabama with that same fire
Hmm.
because yeah, I don't think OU. I mean, I think OU is good, but
Mm,
it's just nobody on Florida seemed like they wanted to be there. I mean, and
yeah.
Mullins, the way that he called that game was totally different from what they called against Alabama. So I think just that loss in the SEC championship and those emotions of losing it to
Mm,
LSU and then losing to Alabama, because they
Yeah.
came so close to be playing in a playoff game. You know, they felt like, and you know what, and I think a lot of, you know, I don't know. I think they really felt like if they would have beat LSU and then beat Alabama, they would have been in the playoffs. So I mean, um, so I think that was kind of shown when they played against OU. So for me, um, that was not the Florida of the, you know, that was the Florida that played LSU. You know, kind of overlooking them. You know, really didn't come out. You
Yeah.
know, so um, you know, and it's hard when all of your best players, you know, sign out of these bowl games, and getting ready for the draft. And so,
Yeah.
you know, it's not necessarily right or wrong because if I had if somebody was telling me you're going to be drafted, you know, maybe in the first round or second round, I don't know if I'm playing either. You know, in a game in a bowl game that um really only matters to the school. You know, I mean, you know, the
See,
same you have bowl games.
I've never understood that. You you signed it. You have a commitment to your teammates. Man, it's not just about the school. It's about those guys that you have sweat with, bled with, and cried with. You know, these are your brothers, and if you're a leader on this team and you decide, you know what, my future is more important than your game. You know, because some guys this is their Super
Yeah.
Bowl. This is the game. This is as far as it's going to go for them. They don't get to go to the NFL, or if they do, they sit on a practice squad and then they're never heard from again. So I feel like I've never liked that. That when a player is like, you know what, no, I'm gonna get ready for the draft. See ya. I feel like if that was me, if that was a teammate of mine doing that, like you either get back in here, get ready for this game coming up, or we're just gonna have a fight right now, and I'm gonna beat you out of this locker room. Because I've just never understood that. It's never
Yeah.
made sense to me that a player who has
Well, now I mean,
committed to
now
this
you can kind of
team.
understand the mindset of the Florida players. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
all your best guys are done. I mean, they lost guys, you know, who
yeah.
didn't play defensive and offense, especially offense. Um, yeah, and so
Oh,
I think I tend to agree with you. I think what's hard for me is I don't necessarily like the decision, but I've never been in a place where somebody's like saying, "Hey, you have an opportunity to make, you know, $5 million a year, and you
yeah,
were you were going to get that if you sign. If you get hurt, that will
yeah.
compromise it."
You're gonna drop some
Yeah,
rounds and you're gonna lose a couple million. Yeah, and I get that, because I'm a dude that works slightly above minimum wage, and will never even touch that much money in my lifetime. But at the same time, the first overall draft pick did play. He was
yeah,
out there playing in that game, and so, like, if Trevor Lawrence is playing, let's see, he lost 33 for 48, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. If that dude's playing, what's your excuse? That guy has the most to lose. You're looking at the first overall draft pick playing in a game and a losing effort at that. So what's their excuse? Why are they not playing? It that's something that just always has sat wrong with me personally. That these players kind of get greedy whenever their agent says, "Hey, there's millions on the line." Like all their 2 to 3 years that they put in on this football team, the summer practices, all that stuff just suddenly means nothing. And I hate that. I've always hated that.
yeah, and I mean, you know, I think Nick's because you know, rarely Nick Saban's players sit even for and
Hmm.
but they haven't had not a lot of meaningless bowl games But you think
Yeah.
about last year when they played against Michigan. Um, I think there was one, uh, but all of them like Jerry Judy played. Um,
Hmm.
I think Ruggs ended up playing like they all and so I think what Nick Saban point probably made the best point about it was you have a chance to actually increase your stock. You're not gonna worsen your stock by playing.
Hmm.
You're the only thing you're
Yeah.
gonna do is increase your stock. So he likes to see guys play and he encourages guys to play. Um, but it's
Yeah.
kind of that whole thing of his culture. It's like, we are to finishing the season and he encourages players, so I mean that's part of it. I
Hmm.
think for me, I guess where I just look at is if I was in the same position, I don't know if I would not make the same decision to not play. If I had a
Yeah.
guaranteed opportunity, and have seen players get hurt in bowl games and in
Yeah.
the Senior Bowl and things like that. So um,
Yeah.
but talking about you know, going to Clemson and Ohio State, I've been on my rants about Ohio State, and I will never not feel like they shouldn't have been in the playoffs. First of all, um, but I just think Clemson looked like they they were almost like worn out, like they weren't fresh. Was the
Hmm.
biggest thing I could
Yeah.
tell from them, which surprised me because they kind of blew out their matchup against Notre Dame. Um, and
Hmm.
Ohio State, definitely felt more explosive. Um, and
Hmm.
they
Well, they're definitely more
definitely more
fresh.
fresh, I think. Um, you know, um, and that was my thing with Ohio State is like without the whole season you don't have battle as much with injuries, like then this
Hmm.
upcoming national championship game. I mean, um, we lost one of our most key aspects to our offensive line, which is Landon Dickerson. But just going back to Clemson and Ohio State, um, I they definitely did look like one of the best teams in college football. There is no denying it on that side. I just
Hmm.
feel you don't know if we look at Oklahoma, you know. We don't know if during the course of the season, because you came close to Indiana, you came close to Penn State, that you don't end up losing one of these
Hmm.
matchups or losing two of these matchups. So that's my first point,
Yeah.
overall. My second point with them being in the playoffs is they literally had to change the rules for them to play in a conference championship game. And then later on, ESPN says the committee, one of their determining factors, the reason that they are in there is because they won the Big Ten. But I think it should have been not that point should be null and void because they had to change the rules for them to play that game. Um,
Yeah.
anyways, but your question was does that rule off that they shouldn't have been in the playoffs? I still feel like it should have. Do I think that they were one of the best teams after they played Clemson? I think they were. Um, uh,
Hmm.
and but the for me the criteria. I mean, I don't know. It just felt like Alabama could have made the same case. Alabama could have only played 5 games and still been in the playoffs. All those teams could have done that and been,
Yeah.
Alabama for sure less injuries at full strength, especially on the offensive and some defensive guys for Alabama could have been in that same
Yeah.
boat. Looking at the Alabama Notre Dame game, I think a lot of people expected it. You saw some moving forward from Notre Dame. I think they are a lot more physical on their trenches. But like Brian Kelly said, I mean, there's been no team who has been able to stop Alabama's offense. So,
Yeah.
everybody's attacking Brian Kelly. And that was a good point he made. He's like, tell me which coach has stopped them yet. And they haven't yet, you know? And
Yeah.
so everybody gets, so upset with Notre Dame because they can't get past Alabama, but most teams can't get past Alabama, And so
Yeah.
um I think Notre Dame was a good team. Um I I I do think Texas A&M would have beat that team. And I think Texas A&M could have, based on the way Clemson did play. I think Texas A&M could have beat that Clemson team too. So
Yeah.
um, I I I don't know because at some the SEC games. I mean, besides the Florida game, I think most of the SEC teams won their bowl games, but it was pretty close around the board. So, um, but I don't know. It's just odd. I think the Clemson Ohio State was the oddest thing to me because I never seen Clemson looking that flat. Maybe the only other time I could think was when Jalen Hurts beat Clemson before they beat Georgia in the national championship. Maybe that was the only other time I'd seen Clemson that flat. But I Clemson looked tired. I don't know if I could get around that point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on the semifinals?
Man, I mean, I just basically echo everything you said. You know, like Ohio State, man, I just like are they, the one of the best teams that was in the playoffs? Yeah, but they shouldn't have been there. Like it's just they didn't earn that playoff spot this year. And if it was any other year, like you know, if COVID wasn't a thing, like I believe they would be still in the playoffs. They're a good team, but I just the, they they only played 7 games this year, and that's still a lot. Their players still have wear and tear. They still have stuff, injuries and stuff, but you can't. They just didn't earn it, and I feel like they got in because of who they are. Are now again, they are, I would say, the second best team that was in the playoffs this year. They're playing the number one team. Um, I just don't feel like they should have been in. And like I was telling you, man, I think Alabama needs to send a clear and just decisive message to the NCAA. I hope Bama puts up 70 on them. I hope they just run them off the field. Like you don't belong here. There was other teams that did, and we're gonna show you how we feel about that, and just annihilate them.
Yeah, it'll
You
be
know,
interesting to see. I
I,
mean, usually it's a lot of people are cheering against Alabama. I mean rightfully so,
mhm.
based on the time, you don't want to see the dynasty win. But I wonder if this changes anything. That's what I've been kind of wondering this week. I wonder
Yeah.
if more people will root for a team that, you know, had the first time a team had gone perfect in an SEC schedule, you know. Uh
Mhm.
because what's up for grabs is, we talked about LSU being the greatest team ever, the greatest national champions ever.
Mhm.
And then this year, that's up for grabs again because because
Yep.
LSU still faced, paid people to come, play them the year before. They still had those games on their schedule, and so this is a
Yeah.
ran the table on the SEC, ran against the
Yeah.
best in the East, the best in the East and the best in the West. So I mean,
Yep.
if Alabama does win, it's funny. It's like 1 year LSU, but then Alabama takes the crown right back. Um,
Yeah.
but if Ohio State
Yeah.
wins, this is like the biggest asterisk for me. Like that's what's kind of at stake in
Mhm.
my mind is like, if I was Alabama, I would always be like, we'll just let people decide, like not play.
Yeah.
If they didn't play, like if
Mhm.
we run the course of this thought, if they didn't play and they were like forced to choose, you would have to choose Alabama. You know, I don't know, but
Yeah.
anyways,
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see the game. I wish it was somebody other than anybody but Ohio State, even Cincinnati. Like
Yeah.
Cincinnati may even have a better
Mm-hmm.
case. I know that they didn't beat
Yeah.
Georgia, but they almost beat Georgia, but they went undefeated. I mean, they to me had a bigger case
Yeah.
than Ohio State, especially Texas A&M. I keep going back to Texas A&M. I know, but they but I felt like they should have been in. So, um
Yeah.
best and worst things that we saw. I'll start with my best because it kind of goes back to the Alabama Notre Dame game, and it is one of the most beautiful plays I've ever seen in my life. That I freaked out, like I was going crazy when I saw it. Is Najee
Yep.
Harris's run against Notre Dame for 50 yards, where he literally jumped over a guy. Like what's
Yep.
crazy also at that point when he jumped over the player was I felt like Notre Dame was like, okay, there's a little bit of hope for us in this game. Like we feel good about
Yeah.
where we're at. Like we're different from the team that was in the national championship game a few years ago. Like this is a different Notre
Yeah.
Dame. And you had that feeling, and it all came to an end as soon as Najee jumps over Notre Dame. Like, and one moment proves to you, like, this is where Alabama's at, and this is where you're still at.
Yeah.
Like, in one moment, like,
Yeah.
I think fans from Alabama and Notre Dame, like, saw that, and he does it
Yeah.
right in front of Brian Kelly. And I'm sure, like, if I'm Brian Kelly, I'm like, what in the world? Like, what do we do? Like, how do you even stop that? Where you just literally jumped. And the crazy thing about that jump was, I mean, the Notre Dame players like barely had his head down. So I don't know how high. I mean, he jumps like over him. Like it wasn't like a
Yeah. I
dive.
want to see his
Yeah, like
vertical.
it was over. Like when he did it, like he cleared him. He cleared him like it was nothing. You know, it was like
Yeah.
one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. Um, and they did it. They didn't even really tackle him. I mean, he kind of got pushed out of bounds at the end of the play. So I mean, he never really was pulled down. So oh
Mm-hmm.
man, that's undoubtedly maybe even like if I had to choose like the best of the year, that may have even been the best of the year. Because I mean, there's so much said with that
Yeah.
one play, and really the momentum in that game did change after he did that jump. Was I felt
Mm-hmm.
like Notre Dame did feel kind of in it. They were doing some things. He jumps over him, and that thought process completely changed. Like it's over. It's done.
Yeah.
So, what was your
Yeah.
best?
So my best, the Eagles costing the Giants a playoff spot. So we talked about the NFC East earlier, and just it came down to this team had to lose, this team had to win, kind of thing. We see it every year in the playoffs. This team has to win in order for this team to get in the playoffs. So so the Giants were depending on the Eagles to win. They were depending on a division rival to beat another division rival. And Peterson does the craziest thing I think ever, and he pulls his young rookie quarterback who had 2 rushing touchdowns for a journeyman quarterback, and just it was over. Obviously tanking the season and costing the Giants their playoff spot. Um, I thought it was funny, because a judge got on there and was like, I would, in my, as long as I'm the head coach here, I'll never do anything like that. And talking about the sanctity of the game and all that stuff. And I get that. But, at the same time, dude, you're only mad because your division rival wouldn't win a game so you can get into the playoffs. So, going forward, if the Giants have learned anything, it's don't depend on a division rival to get you into the playoffs. So, yeah, I felt that was funny and I liked it because I feel like next year the Eagles and the Giants games might be kind of worth watching because I feel like there's gonna be some. It's gonna be
What's
kind
so
of
funny
nice,
about that move, Jamie,
but
is I kind of feel like, you know, it was okay. Like Jalen wasn't the offense really wasn't doing anything. I mean, and
yeah,
like if if I think Sudfield is the back, but if he comes in
yeah,
and he has any sort of the spark, they're calling that's one of the greatest moves that Doug Peterson's ever done. You know, it's a
yeah,
50-50 call, you know? And
yeah,
I think a lot of people were like, "Well, it's not senior day, it's, and it's like, but
mm,
if he could have come in and done something a little different it's against a good Washington defense, no, like that's what I, like moves
yeah,
like this, it was it was and like you said, for the Giants to be in the position where you have to depend on another team, you know, should you really
yeah.
even be? Yeah,
A division
I
rival
mean,
at
you
that.
can't blame, whatever. But like I said, if it's a
Yeah,
50-50 chance and like everybody being like Doug Peterson needs out, I'm like, it's not time for that. There are so many other
no,
holes and so many other pieces that they've got to fix with Philadelphia before you get rid of a coach that took you to a Super Bowl. Like
yeah,
and to give Doug Peter, Andy Reid never was able to do that in Philadelphia. It was Doug Peterson, So I
yeah.
mean, it's just it boggles my mind the way that just people are like he can't do it anymore. It's like you got to give Peterson. I don't know. You've got to give him a little grace because he did get you to a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, at quarterback.
I was about to say with Nick
Yeah. So I
Foles.
mean, because it's
So
just not
yeah,
it's not it for me it's I if I if I felt it was a cultural thing with that Philadelphia team, and maybe now maybe it's a question where Doug Peterson is with all the drama with his quarterbacks. Maybe it's created that now,
mhm,
but before you've never heard of that. I didn't think the culture of
no,
Philadelphia was wrong. Like I do think with the Cowboys,
no,
you know. But then again, I said,
yeah,
it would have been a great coaching move. They would have said, "Oh, he lit a spark in that offense. Like what a great time to bring in your backup just to see some." That's
yeah,
what they would have said. You know, I
mhm,
mean, if it would have gone the other
yeah,
way. Now, I mean, Jalen was part of the reason why they got those scores, but throwing the ball, he didn't do anything special. Like, and then
no,
everybody getting on Doug Peterson the next day made no sense, you know?
mhm,
And so I, and look, and if you're a Philadelphia fan, you're like, we lost that game. We are in a higher draft position because
yeah.
because we lost that game. Like, we're doing a lot better now.
Well, it's not really Philly fans that are talking all negative about Doug. It's Giants fans. They're all mad because they cost them a playoff spot. Philly fans are like, we're 4 and whatever, 11 and 1. Like, we had nothing to play for. We get a better draft position if we lose. If they would have won, they would have went up like 3 or 4 picks. Like, it was kind of obvious there, like what you do. And so yeah, from what I've seen, it's only Giants fans that are really really mad right now.
Yeah.
Which, get over yourself. So,
um,
what was your
yeah.
dislike?
My dislike is we were talking about it before the show, but it's everything to do with Houston right now.
Yeah,
Just the whole like the whole. We talked about it from the beginning with, it started like this whole when they got rid of Hopkins, it's like everything has gone downhill. The crazy thing
mm,
is Deshaun Watson's numbers are incredible for this year. Like if
yeah, he was the passing
yeah,
leader.
and and now you're in threat that Deshaun wants out after getting his contract. Like,
Yeah.
man, this has as but I think I was feeling it from day like one. I was like, you can't make a losing head coach your GM as well. Like, why
No.
did you ever think that would work? So, I mean,
Yeah.
uh, I, I mean, some people are like happy with the new GM hire. It's just, man, I like it, because this team, I mean, had a lead on the Chiefs. If they beat the Chiefs,
Yeah.
I feel like they probably would have beat the Titans, and then they would have been in a Super Bowl. I mean, do you feel like that
Yeah.
Houston team would have beat the Titans?
I think it would have been closer than what we got with the Chiefs and the Titans. I feel like they would have went back and forth a little bit, but I feel like defensively, yeah, I think Houston can beat Tennessee. Offensively, yeah, I think Houston would beat Tennessee. San Francisco though in the Super Bowl, but
Well, I mean,
San Francisco's defense is
yeah,
just
I think their
smothering.
defense would have handled because I
Yeah,
mean, because I don't think they had as many weapons as
yeah,
as Deshaun. And I like I think Patrick can just get out of situations that no other quarterback can. You
yeah.
know, but
Outside of Russell Wilson.
yeah, even I don't know. There's that's a whole different discussion. But the main thing was, like there's a good chance that they're in the Super Bowl. I mean, because I do
Yeah,
think they get past the Titans. And
yeah.
so that's where that team was, and like within a year or two, it's to this,
Mm-hmm.
because JJ
Yep.
Watt was wanting to be done for a while now. Deshaun seems like he
Mm-hmm.
wants out. Um, that's why
Mm-hmm.
it surprised me when Brandon Cook says he wants to like grow alongside of Deshaun Watson, which I would too. Uh, but if
Mm-hmm.
Watson goes, I'm like Cooks is like, well, why did I say that? Like I want out too,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't understand Houston. I don't get it. So that's why they're like my overall worst, because they had a lot go, like you build from what you have, but then you get into these player conflicts and it all goes down to the drain, you know? Like,
Yeah.
anyways, you build on what you had, and they're like, no, we want draft picks, we want they destroyed every sense of them moving forward. So anyway, so yeah, my
Yeah.
worst overall would be Houston after the news. I'm hearing that Deshaun may want out, and I was reading an article on NBC Sports talking about that he kind of wants out. So
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Um, just to add to that, if I'm Deshaun, I give Houston time to hire a head coach. Now, as a Chiefs fan, they hired a former executive of the New England Patriots to be their GM. As a Chiefs fan who had Scott Pioli as a GM, if that guy brings the Patriot way to your organization, run. Okay, it doesn't end well. The Patriot way only works up there in Boston. That's it. Doesn't work anywhere else. You'll end up with like someone like Matt Castle as your quarterback, and it's just not. It doesn't end well for the home team. Okay, so run.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing Houston hasn't even interviewed Eric Bieniemy, which I find very, very interesting.
They say that they
So if I'm
won't. They're
Deshaun,
saying that they're not going to even. That's one of the things I read.
wow,
Um, I did
okay,
I did read
wow,
that part of to satisfy Deshaun's, like, they want Deshaun to have a big say in who they will hire to try and keep him there. Which
okay,
I'm like, fine. Like you gotta
yeah,
find a way to keep Deshaun, because after a year that he's had this year, because if they win more, he's up for MVP. He probably is the MVP.
yeah,
So
yeah.
um
Say, let's play a little scenario game before I go to my dislike. Say Deshaun he requests his trade, okay, and say he gets traded to New England and is now got Bill Belichick as his head coach. I mean,
I mean, I yeah, I mean, I don't know if he necessarily has a say where he gets traded. That would be awesome for the Patriots, I guess, but I
mm,
don't see that duo working out at all. At all.
I kind of do. I think he would be able to run that
Well,
offense
if
the way he
but
wants to. He'd be able to run it like Tom was able
but
to
I
run it.
but here's the thing. The whole thing with Tom Brady and ex players just saying that they wanted out of New England, like, said a
Mm,
lot, for I mean, Bill's incredible, but that whole Patriot way is just not meant for some players. And I don't know if it's meant for
yeah.
Deshaun. I think he would do great. I think he'd do fantastic if he bought into it. If he bought into the system, it would be
Mm,
perfect. I just don't think he's a guy that I I think he wants some, like, a strong, like, laid back kind of character, like a Pete Carroll or Andy Reid. I don't know.
or
Yeah,
Ron Riviera.
yeah. So
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Cam wants out, and Cam had a good year with New England, and he wants out. So
Yep.
that's part of why I
Yep.
said I don't think that he would be. I think it would be great for New England, but I don't think he'd want to go there. But if he's wanting a trade, he may not have much of a
Mm,
say, where he goes. So
yeah.
unless the
It's
team
true.
does him a favor, I think the scenarios. I
Mm.
mean, New England would be interested. Um, I think Jacksonville would be interested. Chicago,
Uh,
Chicago would be interested.
I would take Jacksonville off that list, man,
They've
because
got the
that's Trevor
But they've got
Lawrence.
the. I'm meaning they've got the capital to make that trade, though.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you go for? Deshaun Watson kind of a surer bet, or you offer that one spot for Deshaun, So,
Yeah.
um,
We'll table this discussion
yeah,
and we'll see
yeah, because
where it leads. This is gonna be a good
yeah,
couple months because free agency starts in March and then we got the draft in April.
yeah,
So
a
we're
lot of
gonna be able to.
discussion.
We'll stay
Yeah,
with this and
yeah,
yeah. Um, but for my dislike, so my like was Eagles costing the Giants. My dislike was Eagles tanking. Um, I I love the game of football. I've played it for 10 years, played it with you for a majority of that. And I love the game. And I hate, I don't see, I don't think it's Peterson. I think, you were saying like if it's a 50-50 call, I think he knew what he was doing. I think he knew that, what, we're not going to win this game, and we gain nothing from winning this game. So I'm just going to take my starter out. He don't need to get hurt. We're going to ride with him next season. Um, so I get that. But at the same time, that this is not just a game for the Eagles. Like, this is their job. This is their livelihood. This is the last time that a lot of those players are going to play together. And it means a lot to them to win. To win 5 games is a lot. That winning a football game in the NFL is hard. To win that last one against a division opponent, they could go back to that locker room with their heads up and say, you know what, we ended strong. We started 2021 strong. We're going to come in next season with whoever's here. We're going to put in the work and we're going to win more than 5 games. That's the mentality you set by winning that last game. So for him, in my eyes, to purposely tank, I think sets a bad example for your team. Um, and you're messing with people's jobs. Because at a 4-11-1 record, there's people are going to get fired. There's some of those players that might never play another NFL game. And to purposely do that, in my eyes, I feel was kind of wrong on your head coach. Now, I'm not saying he needs to be fired because obviously this is a guy that brought Philly a Super Bowl for the first time. So, that earns him another year. That earns him like another 2 years in my eyes. But he made a mistake in that last game because you basically just said, you know what, we're just gonna lose. I felt like he kind of gave up on his players that last game, and that didn't sit well with me. It was funny to see him screw over a division opponent. That's why it was my like. But at the same time, as a former player myself, that sat wrong with me because I wanted to win every game that I could, even the ones that didn't matter. And so that was why it was my dislike.
Yeah, I'm not really super hard trying to defend the move, but I mean, I just felt like it was easy because Jalen doesn't necessarily guarantee you the win,
Yeah.
and I,
But it gives you your best
but we don't
opportunity.
necessarily know that because I don't, they saw
know.
the coaches seen Sudfeld in practice, like maybe he was showing them looks that they liked. I mean,
like you said, it was 50-50. If it works out, that's the greatest coaching move of the year. If it works out, but it didn't, and now we're asking questions.
I mean, the whole quarterbacks room is interesting for Philadelphia because I'm sure Jalen Hurts hated it too. So then you've got Carson upset, and then you got Jalen Hurts upset. So that would be my point of why you don't do it. If Jalen Hurts is your guy moving forward, you just win, lose or draw. You just stick with your guy. But my point was, it's just like I mean, I don't think I would have done it, but I don't think it's an egregious move that he made because your quarterback wasn't doing anything with it. I mean, you look at Brian Flores. I mean, everybody loves that he does that with, he puts Tua in and then they bring when it's not going well. I mean, I know it's not the same as Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I mean, but what if it didn't work with Ryan Fitzpatrick? What if it was worse? Then they would have said you endangered the development of your rookie. That's what they would have said. But it worked out.
Yeah.
Because we don't, we don't see what they're seeing in practice, and that's why like the whole with Patrick Mahomes is like Andy and them are going crazy to get that guy on the field because they know what he can do, and so obviously Sudfeld, we now know that what he can do, and it's just look horrible. And it may have been a bit, exactly. So I don't know, that would be my point. The biggest point is you had a fractured quarterbacks, and I think that's probably what made that move the worst. But I'm not gonna be the one guy that says it was the most horrible thing I've seen in foot, and I don't think you're on that. I'm not saying that that's what you're thinking. It's just
just on a personal level, I felt it's not the worst thing that I've ever seen in a football game. But just as a former player that just loves every aspect of that game, that misses it with every just bone of my body, even the ones that hurt because of it. I just felt like he gave up and just kind of was like, well, we're just gonna go through the motions, but we're not gonna win this game.
Well, we've got a lot to look at with NFL playoffs coming up. And then definitely we'll be
Mm-hmm.
watching that. Definitely in the Pipkin household, we'll be watching that national championship game. Root for that
Yep.
Roll Tide. Anyways, you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you all later.